And so, once again, I would say that's freedom. But they enslave themselves by trying to be like God. Now, it's nothing against knowledge. Actually, Adam and Eve didn't. They wound up experiencing what it is like to rebel against God. That's really what they learned. And they learned the pain that follows from that. But it wasn't that they learned everything. Adam and Eve didn't learn everything. But they learned what sin was like. And that was the bad thing. So, and one thing I also want to say is that sometimes we hear these verses and they're such a bummer. And we go, oh, here's the curse. But you got to think about the blessings. Also, there's gospel there in this, that God doesn't say, oh, Adam, you know what? You're going to try to grow crops, but it's never going to work. And you're going to die of starvation because you broke this commandment. No, if you work the ground, you will eat. To the woman, he could have said, and you're never going to give birth ever, and the humanity's going to die right then and there because I hate it, because it's state of rebellion against me. No, that's not what the text says. He says, okay, you will bear children, but now it's going to be hard. All right? So they still are able to keep what God has called them to do, but it's just not how it was originally designed to be. I'm just saying the gospel is God told them, look, you're going to die if you eat this. Now, did they die? No, we know that, I'm not sure about Eve, but Adam lived till, I think, 930 years old, according to the scriptures. And you could say their relationship, how it was with God, died. Some people say spiritually die. I don't like to say that. But the truth of the matter is that he did live for a while. And of course, he gives this gospel note that, look, there's going to be coming somebody from the woman. Her offspring is going to crush the head of the devil. Okay, Satan. I don't know what it was. If Satan possessed the serpent, I'm not quite sure how to talk about it. But later in the Bible, it definitely talks about the devil's a liar from the beginning, and he's lying here. So you can, oh, that's Satan. And then in the book of Revelation, it says it calls that old serpent Satan. So, anyways, we do know this was.
So the good news follows that it's the prophecy is that Jesus will come and make it all right.
Yeah, and it's weird because usually when they talk about the word seed or the offspring, usually they talk about the offspring being of the man. But this says a weird thing. It says the offspring of the female. And that actually kind of makes you go, the offspring of the female, how could that, what's different here? Well, you can really say offspring of the female when you think about Mary and she's giving virgin birth, So another thing, the Roman Catholics, and recently I went to a Roman Catholic funeral. That was just interesting because they had a statue of Mary in front and she was crushing the head of the serpent, instead of the offspring, her offspring, which is Jesus, crushing the head of the serpent. So I'm like, oh man, that's going too far here. But actually the original, in the Roman Catholic Church, the original Latin Bible, written in Latin, was called the Vulgate. And the guy who translated it there that she will crush your head. And so they looked at the she and said, oh, that's Mary. And so, but it actually doesn't say she, it says he. And even our English Bibles will say that. So, but anyway.
What's the Greek version say?
Greek version says he too. So it's just really weird.
So they thought it translated to she, but it
I think what happened was he simply made a mistake. And he just, he kind of blew it with it. He did have to translate the entire Bible. So maybe he just, whoops. Sometimes I've written a she when I've written people's names down.
Who wrote it? The person who did the Vulgate?
The Vulgate, the guy who, the Vulgate is a translation, trying to use the best Hebrew and translating it into Latin language. Because what happened were everybody was making their own little translations of the Bible. And the church said, we got to get a hold of this because some of these translations stink. And we're afraid that it's actually endorsing false doctrine out there. So we need a Bible that everybody's going to use. And it's going to be one that's in the common language of that time. When we come back to Martin Luther, the common language in Germany is, of course, German, not Latin. But anyways, they said, let's make a Latin Bible, and everybody's going to have to use that Bible. And so we'll all be on the same page. But people are fallible, and they can make mistakes with translations. So anyways, it's just weird that he would translate it she when it's obviously he.
Yeah, interesting. And then you have to also look at the traditions and all the other ones that have he in it instead of she.
Right. The only one I know that has she is that Vulgate. So it makes me think it was just Jerome making a mistake.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we talked about Jerome in the very first podcast.
Yep. Good old Jerry. No.
Any other? And then so if you look at chapter 3, verse 6, when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were open, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Why do you think that's it?
I think it's in there because all of a sudden now this is even before God shows up. God calls out to Adam, and why are you hiding? Well, because I was naked. And
he's like, who told you you were naked?
Right. And I think the problem is in regards to them already doing this as soon as they sin, is because now there's some separation between man and woman. There's a certain amount of shame. They didn't feel comfortable with each other in that moment. And that is a sign that the one flesh relationship that God had described in Genesis chapter 2 has now been hurt. All right? If they're one flesh, technically you should say, hey, I'm cool with that. But now they feel self-conscious about it. They feel shameful about it. And so I think that's why it's in there, is to say that, look, now their very relationship was hurt. And now the one flesh union isn't what it wasn't what it once was.
And I have a question, I guess, but if God's omnipresent and omniscient, why is he acting like he doesn't already know what's going on?
Well, that's a great question, but you're a parent. Sometimes you ask your kids questions to give them the opportunity to say, God knows everything. He knew what happened. Okay. But he actually gives the opportunity
to confess his sin.
To confess. And what's terrible is they blame others. And sometimes you've probably given your child an opportunity to confess, and they wind up blaming somebody else. Well, why did you do this? Or else I wouldn't have done it, And that's really what Adam does. He blames God. In some ways, this almost goes back to the free will stuff. Oh, why did God allow this? Well, why did you allow the woman to do this? You gave her to me. Come on. Adam blames Eve. She gave it to me, but it was the woman you gave me. So in the end, it's God's fault. And so the confession is disappointing. But, at least they do. They admit they sinned, but they blame, and, there's something else there too. Oh, the devil tempted me. The serpent tempted me, and he deceived me. And he did deceive her. Mm-hmm. But she should have just stuck to God's command. And Adam shouldn't have taken it from his wife. She gave it to him, but he shouldn't have taken it. But it just winds up one of these things where, once again, I think the answer to your question is that God was allowing them to live in this father and child relationship. And sometimes as a parent, that's how you deal with things. You give them the opportunity to talk. Just not, they said, it's over, no talk. He asked them what's going on. Okay. And, that's the sad thing too. Well, what's really neat is that it says that God's walking in the cool of the day. So, that's really So it kind of anthropomorphizes God. Does God walk? He's a spirit. Maybe he took on a human form for that. Some people even said maybe this was Jesus walking. I'm not quite sure what to say. I would think
Yeah,
it
because then
wasn't.
because how would they be able to prophesize a son if maybe they didn't see him already or know he existed?
Yeah, I'm not
going to exist.
I'm not sure because I don't know if the people really understood what the prophecy meant. It just is really odd that it seems like God from the very beginning, though, is comfortable to be doing human stuff. That's what I'll say. And he does the ultimate human stuff by becoming human when God sends Jesus. And of course, we celebrate that at Christmas. Always trying to connect the Bible to why we have celebrations in the church. So, yeah, so there's this prophecy. One is going to come from the woman who's going to crush the head of the serpent. Now, the serpent's going to bite this offspring on the heel, but his head's going to be crushed, and that's the good news. So, and another thing here, it talks about the offspring. What's interesting is there's some words in the English language that the plural and the singular are the same. So I saw a deer. Well, it could have been one, or it could have been 12. You don't know. This word is one of those words where it talks about offspring, and the ultimate part of the prophecy is definitely fulfilled in one person, Jesus, but also we're God's offspring too. And this really works well with Revelation, where it talks about the offspring of the woman. Oh man, I didn't even think about that. Boy, that fulfills the prophecy. The offspring of the woman, which I look at is to be the church. Those are the ones who believe in the Lord and do what he says. And so the offspring doesn't necessarily have to only be about Jesus, but we are the woman's offspring too. So that's kind of interesting. And we are offspring, we're brothers of Jesus. And if that prophecy is about Jesus, we're part of the offspring too, because we're brothers, and you can say sisters, brothers and sisters around Jesus. So we're part of the offspring too. Who's the devil's offspring? Well, in the Gospel of John, it's very evident that everybody who rejects Jesus is actually under the devil's power. It doesn't mean that you're possessed by the devil and you start floating in the air and throwing up on people. No, like
breaking.
Yeah, and your head spins around. But the truth of the matter is that you are tied to him, and what's going to happen to him is going to happen to you. You're both in a state of rebellion against him. And yeah, you're his offspring.
Reading a little bit of this little thing in my
Notes?
Little note, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It says in Romans 5:12-21, Paul takes his readers back to this very moment in history and offers a divine inspired interpretation. He explains that Adam's sin led to the downfall and death of the entire human race. Through one man, Adam, death came, yet through one man, Jesus Christ, grace and the gift of God, which is eternal life, was given. So Sometimes I think to answer that, well, why did God let this happen? And he let it, I think sometimes he let it happen to show his glory and his grace for humanity through his son, Jesus.
Yeah. I you know what? I can't argue against that. I just know, it's never presented as, hey, Adam, sin, so I can send Jesus to be your savior. That's not how it is. No. But of course, God does allow this to happen, and we wind up being, if we're going to be saved from the curse, we find it in Jesus.
Mm-hmm. And I think he wanted us to have an intimate relationship with him. Would we have had an intimate relationship with him before the fall? Maybe. But then it'd almost be as though we were angels in a sense, because the angels didn't sin or don't experience suffering the same way we do. Mm-hmm. And that can help us grow in our intimacy with Jesus and with God. But, I think without the fall, then we wouldn't have the opportunity to be that intimate with him. And have a relationship, a personal relationship with him. Maybe we would have, but
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting, though, because I think that's the part of the personal relationship that it said God was walking in the cool of the day and calling out to him. That's very personal. And so I think there would have been that, but there wouldn't have been God's love at a price.